Hello, I am Niranjan Dey from Geology Department, JK College, Purulia. Today we are talking about the particle transport processes, and this is the content of my whole presentation. So, in formation of sedimentary rock, transportation plays a great role. By this transportation, sediments are reached to their destination, means a lowland area like basin where they deposits. Through whole transportation process, some different types of mechanisms are worked in different types of environment and medium. On the basis of mediums acting forces on particles and sediment concentration in fluid, transportation processes are divided into two parts. One is particle transport by fluid and two is particle transport by sediment gravity flow. Now we start from one particle transport by fluid. Before we talking about the transport processes, briefly we figure out the forces acting on the particle for the movement of fluid. Okay, in the figure we can see three major forces are worked. One is force due to gravity, two is lift force due to Bernoulli effect, and third one is drag force due to boundary shear stress. Now if we combine lift force and drag force, we get a net force called fluid force, and the entrainment of the particle from the bed happen in this part. Now I come to transport process and paths. Once sediment has been eroded and put into motion, the transport path that it takes during further downcurrent movement is a function of the settling velocity of the particle and the magnitude of the downcurrent velocity and turbulence. Generally, coarser particles move on or very close to the bed during transport, called bed load transport, and finer particles carried higher up in the main flow above the bed, called suspended load transport. In bed load transport, two mechanisms are working: traction and saltation. Traction is a type of mechanism where particles that are commonly transported as a part of the bed load in continuous contact with the bed. For example, rolling, sliding, and creep. From the figure, we clearly understand the rolling and sliding, but the creep is the method where grains being pushed a short distance along the bed in a downcurrent direction, impact of the other moving grains. Now the saltation is another type of bed load transport in which grains tend to move in intermittent contact with the bed and move by a series of jumps. They are rising off at the bed at a steep angle nearly 45 degree and then falling back along a descent path of about 10 degree. This asymmetric saltation path interrupted by turbulence or by collision with another grain. Suspended load transport. As the flow strength of current increases, the intensity of turbulence increases close to the bed. Particle trajectories become longer, more irregular, and higher up from the bed than the trajectories of the saltating grains. Upward component of fluid motion resulting from turbulence increases with respect to the downcurrent gravitational force, which allowing the particles to stay suspended above the bed for longer. Generally, finer materials like silt, clay is carried in suspension, but any grain size can be carried. As increases the load, increases the viscosity, so the larger grains can be carried. Now the second part is particle transport by sediment gravity flow. Sediment can also be transported independently of fluid by the effect of gravity acting directly on the sediments. In this type of transport, fluid may play a role in reducing internal friction and supporting grains, but they are not primarily responsible for the downslope movement. Sediment can be transported by the direct action of gravity in both subaerial and subaqueous environment. Gravity transport under submarine conditions, especially in deep sea environment, has the greatest sedimentological significance. So from these mass transport processes, we are only discussing about debris flow and turbidity current. Debris flow and turbidity current. Debris flow. Debris flow, a type of sediment gravity flow which behave as Bingham plastic. That is, they have a yield strength that must be overcome to begin the flow. Here, debris flow can be divided into two flows: mud flow with cohesive strength and grain flow with frictional strength. Mud flow. Flow of sediment water mixture with sediment concentration tend to have a high apparent viscosity as a result of interparticle interaction. Silt and clay-sized particles are responsible for that cohesive strength. Viscosity of the mixture also vary with water content and grain size. Mixture will start to move when applied stress is overcome the yield strength. Grain flow. Cohesionless flow of loose larger grains with frictional forces between constituent grains along a slope known as grain flow. This type of movement are mostly induced by the steepening of the slope, that is called angle of slip, of its actual place of rest, that is called angle of rest. When angle of rest is exceeded, the internal shear stress overcome the internal shear strength, which is caused by the intergranular friction. After that, when suddenly shear falls below the critical value, flow will freeze and collapse upon itself. As a result, small particles filter downward through the dispersed layer, which is known as kinetic sieving. For this mechanism, reverse grading is assumed to form during grain flow. Turbidity current. Turbidity current is a kind of density current that flows downslope along the bottom of an ocean or lake because of density contrast with the surrounding water arising from the sediments that become suspended in the water owing to turbulence. Once sediment is suspended in a turbidity current, the turbidity current continues to flow for some time under the action of gravity and inertia. Flow will stop when the sediment water mixture that produces the density contrast with the ambient water is exhausted by the settling of the suspended load. Turbidity current can be generated by a variety of mechanisms including sediment failure, storm-triggered flow of sand and mud, bed load inflow from rivers and glacial meltwaters, etc. Turbidity current have been observed to occur under natural conditions throughout the geologic time in marine environment on continental margin. Deposits. The deposits of turbidity current, commonly called turbidites, are of two basic types. One is with poor grading, few internal lamination and lacking of basal scour marks. Another type is with normal grading, laminations and small scale crossbedding. In 1962, Sir Bauma proposed an ideal turbidite sequence, now commonly called a Bauma sequence. This sequence is characterized by 5 distinct phases. A is with graded bedding, B with lower plane lamination, C with ripple marks, D upper parallel lamination, and E with pelletic interval. Unit E may or may not be part of turbidite flow unit because of very fine material deposition slowly from the water column. It is the brief discussion about the particle transport processes. Thank you for watching the video.